Jaya Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Prabhupada. Jaya Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Srila Prabhupada. Gaur Premanandi Hari Hari Bol Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahamsa Parivajaka Acharya Asatar Sata Shri Srimad ISKCON DBT Founder Charles of Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Maharaj Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai Nitya Lila Prabhisha Om Vishnupad is Divine Grace Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Prabhupada Ki Jai Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai Prem Se Kahosh Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasadi Gaur Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai Shri Shri Radha Krishna Gopa Gopanath Shama Kunda Radha Kunda Giri Govardhan Ki Jai Shri Bhajamubhinama Nama Ki Jai Shri Navadip Narayan Puridam Ki Jai Shri Rachal Jagannath Puridam Ki Jai Ganga Mai Ki Jai Jamuna Mai Ki Jai Bhakti Devi Ki Jai Mati Tulsi Maharani Ki Jai The most beautiful Lordship Shri Shri Radha Govinda Ki Jai Shri Shri Giriraj Govardhan Ki Jai Shri Shri Jagannath Baladev Subhadra Ki Jai, Shri Shri Gauritai Ki Jai, Samaveta Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai. Going back to home, back to Godhead Ki Jai. ISKCON New York Yatra Ki Jai. Brihanda Bhagavad Transcendental Book Distribution Ki Jai. International Food for Life Transcendental Prasadam Distribution Ki Jai. Shri Harinam Sankirtan Ki Jai. Nittai Gaur Premanandi Hari Hari Gaur. All glories to the seven devotees. All glories to the seven devotees. All glories to the seven devotees, all glories to Shri Shri Guru and Guru and glories to the Prabhupada. Maybe make that a little bigger. Everybody can see clearly? Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Deving Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayamudirayat. Before reciting the Srimad Bhagavatam, which is our very means of conquest, let us offer respectful obeisances unto the personality of God and Lord Narayan, unto Narayan Rishi, the supremest human being, unto Mother Saraswati, the goddess of learning, unto Srila Vyasadeva, the author, and unto Srila Prabhupada, who is the translator, commentator, and our spiritual master. Nashta Prayeshu Bhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavatittama Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naistaki. By regularly attending the Srimad Bhagavatam class and by rendering service unto the pure devotee, all that is troublesome to the heart is almost completely destroyed, and loving devotional service unto the personality of Godhead, whose worship of transcendental songs becomes established as an irrevocable fact. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So we're continuing our reading from the 4th canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam. This is chapter 8. Dhruva Maharaj leaves home for the forest, and today's text is 69. Yudushkaram karma kritva lokapalaya api prabhu Aishatyacharito Rajan Yasho Vipulayang Stava Sudushkarang Karma Kritva Lokapala Api Prabhu Aishatyacharito Rajan Yasho Vipulayang Stava Sudushkarang karma kritva Lokapalaya api Prabhu Aishatyat Charito Rajan Yasho Vipulayang Stava Sidushkarang Karma Kritva Lokapalaya api Prabhu Aishatyacharito Rajan Yasho Vipulayang Stava Sidushkarang Karma Kritva Lokapalaya api Prabhu Aishatyacharito Rajan Yasho Vipulayang Stava Sidushkarang Karma Kritva Lokapalaya api Prabhu Aishatyacharito Rajan Yasho Vipulayang Stava Sidushkarang Karma Kritva Lokapalaya api Prabhu Aishatyacharito Rajan Yasho Vipulayang Stava. Anyone else? And remember again, we've said this many times, the Sandhya, when the I turns into a Y, it means that you run it into the next word. You don't say Aishyati. You say Aishyat, and then you put the Y with the next word. Yachirato Rajan. Okay. So, Srimad is Sudushkaram, impossible to perform. Karma, work. Kritva, after performing. Lokapalai, by great personalities. Api, even. Prabhu, quite competent. Aishyati, will come back. Achirataha, without delay. Rajan, my dear king. Yashaha, reputation. Vipulayan, causing to become great. Tava, your Prabhu's translation for this verse. My dear king, your son is very competent. He will perform activities which would be impossible even for great kings and sages. Very soon he will complete his task and come back home. You should know that he will also spread your reputation all over the world. Please repeat. My dear king, your son is very competent. He will perform activities which would be impossible even for great kings and sages. Very soon he will complete his task and come back home. You should know that he will also spread your reputation all over the world. Srila Prabhupada's purport. Here in this verse, Narada Muni has described Dhruva Maharaj as Prabhu. This word is applicable to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Sometimes the spiritual master is addressed as Prabhupada. Prabhu means the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and Pada means host. According to Vaishnava philosophy, the spiritual master occupies the post of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, or in other words, he is the bona fide representative of the Supreme Lord. Dhruva Maharaj is also described here as Prabhu because he is an Acharya of the Vaishnava school. Another meaning of Prabhu is master of the senses, just like the word Swami. Another significant word is Sudushkaram, very difficult to perform. What was the task that Dhruva Maharaj undertook? The most difficult task in life is to satisfy the Supreme Personality of Godhead And Dhruva Maharaj will be able to do that. We must remember that Dhruva Maharaj was not fickle. He was determined to execute his service and then come back. Every devotee, therefore, should be determined that in this life he will be able to satisfy the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and by that process go back home, back to Godhead. That is the perfection of the highest mission of life. Namo Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Krishnaya Bhutale Srimati Bhaktivedanta Swami Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Vacharani Vivashesha Shunyavadi Pashtha Devshtayani Om Ajnana Timarannasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshur Inmalitam Jaina Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Stapitam Jaina Bhutale Swayam Rupakadamayam Vadati Swapanakam Vande Ahang Shri Guru Shri Utapadakamalam Shri Gurun Vaisyavansa Shri Rupam Sagadatam Sahagana Raghunathan Vitam Tang Sajivam Chadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Saritam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakandita Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabando Jagatpate Gopesha Kopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namosate Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vishavanu Sute Devi Pranamami Haripriye Pancha Kopatu Vyasya Kripa Sindhu Evacha Patitanang Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasadi Gaur Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So the summer season is fully upon us. Today's forecast is 96 degrees for the high. So if you go out chanting, I heard this morning party is going to Battery Park, yeah. So it's kind of close to the water, so maybe a little cooler, but still be prepared. Stay hydrated, wear light clothing. But one of the benefits of summertime, in this temple in particular in New York, is we get to see Govinda's chest. He doesn't wear a top cloth anymore, he just has a bare chest. So we're meant, as you know, to meditate on the different parts of the Lord's transcendental body. In the Nectar of Devotion, all of these different parts are described. So what is the main word used to describe Govinda's chest? One word, main word used to describe Krishna's chest. Broad, yes. There are different parts of the body that are broad, and one of them is the chest. So we should, as Prabhupada said many times, I've written these books for you, for my disciples and followers, not just to be sold. So we have to read these books and try to remember what's in them, including the description of Krishna's different bodily parts. So in today's verse, Narad Muni is assuring King Uttanapada that his great son, Dhruva Maharaj, after completing his task, how long did it take him to realize the Supreme Lord, to see him in person? 6 months. So, why does it take us so long? Assuming that we haven't yet realized seeing the Lord actually face to face like Dhruva did. We're not as serious and sincere. Here it's stated that Dhruva Maharaj was not fickle. He was determined to accomplish the task and then go back home. So we should be similarly determined, or try our best to be determined. At the same time, we shouldn't think that it's formulaic. That if Dhruva Maharaj did it in 6 months, I should do it in 6 months, and if I don't do it in 6 months, I'm a failure and I'm going to leave. No, this is a lifetime process. The goal is not just self-realization. Many people, there are many societies out there, self-realization, fellowship, and others, they stress this self-realization, but we're actually stressing God realization. Prabhupada gives the example, it's like In the darkness, you can't see yourself. But when you can see the sun, in other words, when the sun rises, even just before the sun rises, just at dawn, as we say, before you see the sun above the horizon, that's called dawn, there's enough light that you can see yourself and everything around you. So if we realize God, then we realize ourselves and everything else. So we're not chasing after self-realization, we're after God realization, Krishna realization. And we know from our path that the Supreme Personality of Godhead is Krishna. Vaisheshika Prabhu likes to start his initiation presentation by reciting Brahma Samhita, beginning with that very first verse of the 5th chapter. Everybody should know. This is our founder of our Sampradaya, Brahma, has given this. And this is the very first verse is given, at least in that 5th chapter. There are other chapters that were not discovered. But Ishvara Parama Krishna Satchidananda Vigraha Anadir Adir Govinda Sarva Karana Karana. So this is complete description of the Supreme Personality. Ishvara Parama. Because every one of us is minute Ishvara. We have control over some objects, some space, maybe even some other living entities. But nobody besides Krishna can say Ishvara Parama, supreme controller of everything and everyone, which Lord Brahma found out in person, directly. When he stole the coward boys and calves, Krishna showed him, yeah, you're a controller, but you're not the supreme controller. You're not Ishvara Parama. That's why Brahma could write that verse heartfelt, because he experienced himself. Krishna is the supreme controller. So Ishvara Parama Krishna. No other name is applicable. Yes, the name Krishna means all attractive. And every one of us tries to have or emphasize some part of our personality that we think is attractive. But Krishna is supremely attractive. He possesses so much attraction, he's so attractive that he attracts Cupid, who everyone is attracted by. But lo and behold, Srimati Radharani is known, Krishna is known as Madan Mohan, because he can attract Cupid, but she's known as Madan Mohan Mohini, because she attracts Krishna. So everything is there in Prabhupada's books, everything is there in the Shastra. We just have to take the time to learn. So now, Narad Muni is advising again Uttanapada, your great son, Dhruva, is going to come home pretty soon. He will accomplish the task very quickly. And some interesting points. Very first verse, Sudushkaram. Prabhupada says, impossible to perform. In the synonyms, in the translation it says, impossible even for great kings and sages. So interesting, just a few days ago was the anniversary of that marathon, 17 volumes in 2 months, which I had the good fortune of participating in. I was running the typesetting equipment to put out all those books. So many of you know the story. Prabhupada was on a morning walk with Rameshwar, Radhaballabha and others, and he demanded that you catch up, which meant that we had to do 17 volumes. At that point, we were doing maybe 1 volume a month. And so Rameshwar said, Prabhupada, we can maybe do, because Prabhupada says, come on, you have to speed up. He said, well, we can maybe do 2 volumes a month. Prabhupada said, no, I want you to catch up as quickly as possible. 17 volumes in 2 months. And at that point, Rameshwar made the mistake of saying, Prabhupada, that's impossible. And everybody should memorize Prabhupada's response. Impossible is a word in a fool's dictionary. Anything is possible if we surrender to Krishna. So then you may wonder, why is it stated here, impossible even for great kings and sages? So, very difficult to perform. But even the most difficult task can be, you can turn it off, it's okay. Yeah. Even the most difficult task can be made possible by the mercy of the Supreme Lord or the Lord's pure devotee. Here Prabhupada says that The word Prabhu is used for the spiritual master because the spiritual master is a representative of Krishna. Once on another walk, Prabhupada is explaining, one devotee asked, Prabhupada, what do you mean by, because Prabhupada had stated that there are three classes of perfect beings. The Nitya Siddha, ones who have never come to the material world. The Sadhana Siddha, those who have come to the material world and now by practice of sadhana, they perfect their lives, they go back. And then there's Kripa Siddha, somebody who's taken to the path but didn't execute it perfectly, but by extra grace, extra benediction of the Supreme Lord or the Lord's representative, that person can also come to perfection. So Prabhupada gave the example. He said, it's just like if I offer you some money and you don't take it, but being extra kind to you, I stuff that money in your pocket. That's Kripa Siddha. We may be practicing not so perfectly, but by the mercy of the spiritual master, we can also come to perfection. Now we shouldn't count on that. We should try to execute sadhana bhakti perfectly, just like Dhruva did. He was given the sadhana, chant Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya, and follow the different recommendations that Narada Muni gave him, and he did it perfectly, and therefore he came to the perfect stage. So all of us have been given very, very simple sadhana. Prabhupada said of all the instructions that the spiritual master has given, the most important is, who knows? Chant your 16 rounds every day. Now, obviously there has to be a quality to that chanting, and that quality means you have to follow the four regular principles. Otherwise, it's compared to trying to light a fire and pouring water at the same time. Maybe eventually you will get that fire going, but why make the task more difficult? By applying fire, but at the same time pouring water. So if we keep ourselves squarely, firmly in the mode of goodness by following these four regulative principles, and they're good for us. For many decades, actually, I was the director of academic outreach for the Los Angeles Temple, New York, which meant going to schools everywhere from elementary all the way up to university and presenting Krishna consciousness. So one high school that I used to go to regularly, we had gone so many times that the teacher, he's now passed on, his name is Mr. Macklin. If we didn't present the four regular principles, he would insist, tell them about your principles. Tell them about your principles that you follow. Because, again, from the perspective of a non-devotee, this is a very, very difficult task. And he wanted the students to understand how serious these Hare Krishnas are. So we would explain. No flesh foods. Because if you eat flesh foods, it destroys the quality of mercy. It's a merciless activity to kill an animal unnecessarily just to eat its flesh. And not only that, it's going to come back, as we were discussing last night, about karma. Everything that you do, good or bad, is going to produce some reaction, good or bad, that you have to enjoy or suffer in the future. So those animals that you killed, they're going to get a chance to kill you in the future. That was one of the reasons why Mrigari surrendered to Narada Muni. It wasn't just that Narada Muni gave him good instructions, but by his mystic potency, Narada Muni allowed him to see all those animals that he'd been killing, waiting to kill him in the future. So when he saw that, he woke up. And he realized, yes, this is not a good profession to continue. So we always explain that killing the animals unnecessarily to eat them, what to speak of killing humans and eating them. We know throughout Vedic history there's mention of Rakshasas, man-eating demons. But that's not just mythology, as many people think. Oh, this Vedic, it's happening today. I just read a news article yesterday that in this war going on between Russia and Ukraine, one Russian soldier was caught. He and his mate had been stuck somewhere, and they don't know if he killed his mate and ate him or the mate died, but he ate his mate. So this kind of stuff is going on still. Cannibalism is not just something mythological. It happens. And it's been happening on this planet. There was a famous case in Fiji, the island of Fiji. The natives there, they practiced cannibalism. And the British, when they went there, they found out the hard way. One British representative went to have a meeting with one of the tribal chiefs there. And those tribal chiefs, they're not African, but they kind of have obviously some African ancestry. So they are, part of their culture is, the chief especially, they wear these huge afros. They have these huge, and they even have what we discovered later on in New York. I grew up with an afro and a picking out the afro. So they have that, this particular comb that they use for picking out the afro so it stands way out. But the culture is you don't touch a man's hair, what to speak of the chief. So this British person was enamored of this afro, and he didn't know the culture, and he touched the chief's hand. The chief took a stick and boom, killed him. And they cut up the body and cooked it and they ate it. So these things that we read about in the Vedas, they're not mythological. They're happening because human beings are, as you know, driven by different modes of nature. So in the mode of ignorance, people do these kind of things. They will eat anything, up to and including other human beings. So we stress, this no meat eating is good for you. Flesh foods are no good. And even the non-devotees grudgingly admitted that. When I was growing up, when I was a boy, they said you have to eat meat to be healthy. But gradually they realized that was not true. So now they stopped saying that. You don't see that. But they used to have that plastered everywhere. You must eat meat, you must eat fish for this reason, that. No, now they gave up on that because it's not true. Because so many cultures around the world, especially many of you here are from India, for thousands of years, millions of years, people have been living vegetarian diet very nicely. And those of us who switched from eating meat to not eating meat, we don't see any loss of energy or mental acumen or anything. You don't lose anything by giving up meat. Then no gambling. Gambling means that you take what you deserved to have in this life. In other words, by your karma, you're meant to have a certain amount of wealth. And in pursuit of more wealth, you gamble. And we know, I always tell the students from experience, hopefully not personal experience because they're young, but you must have heard that the vast majority of gamblers lose, 99.99%. In America, we have this famous Sin City, Las Vegas. So many people go there. And the vast majority of them go home with a lot less money than they went there with. It's a losing proposition. And it's actually, it's a losing proposition. So why go down that road? Better to make proper use of whatever you've been given by your karma. And interestingly enough, there have been studies done here in the United States that a good percentage of people who win the lottery, meaning they've won millions of dollars, a lot of them again become poor. Because out of ignorance, they blow it. They go to Vegas and gamble, or they party and they give all their relatives money, and then in a short time, they have no money. Because it wasn't their karma to be rich. By some good fortune, anomalous fortune, they got money, but because it's not their karma to be rich in this life, it's again taken away. And Prabhupada pointed out many times, there's no sadder person in the world than somebody who was poor, who became rich, and then again became poor. If they had just remained poor their whole life, you can deal with it. But if you're a poor person, you become rich by gambling or by inheritance or whatever, and then you lose it all and become poor again. Such a sad person. So, intoxication. That one should be obvious, but it's not, because people continue to try to find happiness through intoxicating substances. But I always point out to students, right in the middle of that word, intoxicant, is toxic. And what does toxic mean? Poison. So you're voluntarily putting something poisonous in your system in a hope to become happy. And yes, there is some high that you experience. But I always point out it's a roller coaster, because you take this intoxicant, do you stay high? And the students, even the youngest ones, they say, no, you come down again. So you ride this roller coaster. It's very expensive financially and health-wise to keep going up and coming down. And the lows get lower and the highs get lower. You don't get as high as you used to using the same substance. So it's not recommended. Don't go down that road, I tell the students. If you haven't started, don't. And if you have already started, stop. Because it's an expensive ride. And then illicit sex. Even the younger students can understand that the most deadly, or some of the most deadly and virulent diseases, how are they transmitted? Through sexual contact. So if you take, Vedic culture doesn't say just that the women should remain pure, men also. Illicit sex applies to everyone, not just to women. So if you take, marriage means, ideally, a man who's never been exposed and a woman who's never been exposed. So if they get married, do they have to worry about any? No, you don't have to worry about any such thing as disease or anything like that, because you've never been exposed to it. So these principles, if we follow them and we chant our 16 rounds, most important requests, demand from the spiritual master, then life becomes easy and beautiful and wonderful. And like Dhruva, will eventually come to perfection. Maybe not in 6 months, maybe not 6 years, depending on us. One time Prabhu just asked that question, how long does it take to, he said, you can become perfect in a moment, 1 second, if you're serious. And who's the example of that from Vedic history? Who is an example? Yes. Katunga. He was a human being, but he was such a good warrior that the demigods employed him to fight on their behalf against the demons. And then when the fight was over, they said, we are so happy with you, please ask any benediction. And he said, well, I just want to know how much longer I have to live. They said, you have a moment. So in that moment, he surrendered and went back to Godhead. So it can be done if we're serious. But typically, we have to be patient. Not that I'm going to chant a certain amount of rounds. I've told the story before, but I always remember when I was in San Diego for a couple of years. There was one Indian gentleman, very well-to-do, accomplished personality, but he took to the Krishna consciousness seriously, and he would come every morning and chant japa with the devotees. So once he asked me, approached me, and said, Prabhu, can I ask a question? Sure. How many times do I have to chant this Hare Krishna mantra to become to perfection? I said, it's not a need. No, please tell me. 3 lakhs, 5 lakhs. How many times do I have to chant? So I said, no, it's up to you. You can chant perfectly the very first time you chant, if you're serious enough. Or it may take lifetimes. It's up to you. That's why we chant every morning. Bahu janma koriyari shravana kirtan tabutana paya Krishna pade pemana. It can take many, many births. It's up to us if we remain infested with those 10 offenses. That's why we say, if one who is infested with the 10 offenses in the chanting of the Hare Krishna mantra, despite his endeavor to chant the holy names for many births, he will not get the love of Godhead, which is the ultimate goal of this chanting. So I tried to get this gentleman to explain. It was very difficult because he was fixed on this idea that there must be 1 crore or whatever you chant, and then boom, you come to perfection. It doesn't work like that. Because we have free will. It's by free will that we're here in this material world. Sometimes people are so confused about that. If the spiritual world is perfect, how did I leave? How can one leave perfection? Because of free will. Free will. Free will means we have the free will to serve Krishna, love Krishna, or we can wonder what it would be like to be Krishna. And you can't experience that in the spiritual world. You can't experience being Krishna. You're not Krishna. You're a minute part and parcel of Krishna. So to give us the illusion of being Krishna, or the illusion that we can become Krishna, we're put in this material realm. And that's what Prabhupada says even at the end of today's purport. Become perfect and go back to home, back to Godhead. You can't go back if you were never there. Which some people claim adamantly. We were in some limbo state, and then we came to the material world, and now we can go to the spiritual world. No. Back to home, back to Godhead, by qualifying, by surrendering, by reawakening that natural and pure love of Krishna that's there. The tendency to love is there. We can't deny that. Where does it come from? Every living entity has that tendency to love. Even the most vicious carnivores on this planet, like lions and tigers, they have that tendency to love their offspring. You try. Don't try. But you try to take a cub from a lioness or a tigress, tear you apart. Tear you apart. That tendency to love is there in every living entity. But we are not reposing our love in the proper place. We're not reposing our love in the proper place. Krishna is the proper, ultimate recipient of love, and he gives love in return. It's not that he's yes, he's the transcendental autocrat, but not in the way that we think of autocracy in the modern world. Somebody who's just sucking the life and the energy out of everybody else for their own pleasure. No, Krishna is not like that. Krishna is the reservoir of pleasure, the reservoir of love. So when we love Krishna, Krishna already loves us. It's just an uncovering process. Nitya Siddha Krishna Prema Sadhya Kavanai Shravanari Shuddhachita Karya Uday. That this love of Krishna is already there in the heart of all living entities. How we get it out? It's there. How to get it out? Shravanari Shuddhachita. By practicing this Bhakti Yoga process, beginning with Shravana. So we have to agree. We should want to. In the beginning it may not be so tasty, but we should make it our duty to hear every day. And the formula that I like to share, that Jyotikarma Prabhu gave many, many decades ago, because I asked him, he's a very, very knowledgeable person, God brother. And he said, just by systematic reading. So his recommendation is 10 pages a day of all the major books that Prabhupada wrote. So every day you read 10 pages of Gita, 10 pages of Srimad Bhagavatam, 10 pages of Nectar of Devotion, 10 pages of Chaitanya Charitamrita. 10 pages. How long does it take to read 10 pages? 15 minutes maybe. 10 pages of each book. And if you read 10 pages a day, times 30 days in a month, that's 300 pages. Practically that's a whole book in 1 month, just from 10 pages. Now the Gita is 1,000 pages, so it'll take you a little more than 3 months to finish the Gita, reading 10 pages a day. But like that, if you systematically read every day, Bhagavad Gita, Srimad Bhagavatam, Chaitanya Charitamrita, Nectar of Devotion, at least those 4. If you can add others, fine, but at least those 4. And just keep going. Keep going. And when you get to the end, you start again. And just keep. I've had the good fortune of traveling extensively with Prahladananda Swami. And he never stops reading. He never stops. If we're on the way, driving from one engagement to another, he takes out his iPad and he asks, can I read? And he'll read Krishna book and he already knows it. I remember I was shocked. I read Prabhupada's books and I remember some portion, but I remember in 1991 we were in Vrindavan together on Parikrama, and he recited verbatim one chapter after another of Krishna book. That's not easy. Remembering shlokas, that's, doable. But to remember verbatim an entire chapter and then another chapter, serious reading. So that's the example that we should follow. Just seriously read every day and everything else will come together. Of course, you have to finish your 16 rounds, and do some practical service. But the reading has to be there. That's why it says Shravanadi, beginning with Shravana. If we read, if we hear, yes, nowadays of course we can also hear recorded lectures or recorded readings of the Krishna book, or like Amala Bhakta Swami has given us Krishna book recording. So one can listen, the same as reading, but every day one has to expose oneself to this transcendental literature, and then the cleansing process becomes accelerated. And then the love that's naturally there, eternally there, comes out. So we can stop here if there are any questions. Yes, Bhakta Michael's hand went up first. No, siddha means perfect or perfection. A siddhi is a perfection. So those three are different categories of perfect beings. The nitya siddha means never came to the material world. In other words, they haven't misused their free will. The sadhana siddha misused free will, came to the material world, and by practicing sadhana came to the perfectional point. Then the third category was the kripa siddha. Somebody who's been practicing, but maybe didn't do it perfectly, but for some reason the spiritual masters would become, just like in that marathon that I discussed, 17 bars in 2 months, Prabhupada said, everyone who participated will go back to Godhead. So that's my hope. As I was part of that marathon, I know I'm not practicing perfectly, but because Prabhupada said, everyone who participated in that marathon will go back to God, and Krishna will do it. That's why Prabhupada said in this purport, the spiritual master is God's representative, Krishna's representative. So when the spiritual master says something will happen, Krishna will make it happen.
And the other part of my question, is it, how do I say? Is it predicted what type of siddha you are, or is you just have to go along with the process? For example, like some people are very eager when they join Krishna consciousness, and some rarely not. They don't really practice the principles, but they just go on, and then they make advancement. But there's some people who are fixed as soon as they join, and then they just make credible advancement. Is it like off like past life, or just?
It's by desire. Krishna fulfills all desires. And that's why the process of Krishna consciousness means learning how to desire properly. That's what the spiritual master is teaching us. Lifetime after lifetime, we've been not desiring properly. We desire things that are not good for us, just like gambling, intoxication, like that. So the spiritual master is teaching us how to desire properly. So if you come to that point of desiring properly, wanting to go back to home, back to Godhead, then you will do what's necessary to fulfill that desire. At least try your best. So some are so serious like Dhruva, they do it properly and they get the result. Others may be a little short, and that's why Prabhupada said there was that famous exchange between Prabhupada and his disciples. It was in the New York temple. That if you have a tinge of material desire, you'll have to come back. In other words, you have to be 100% pure. And then he saw that and the devotees were like, okay, 90%. Still they're not saying 80%. And then Prabhupada said 60%, but, and then he left. He walked out of the room. So yes, it's possible by the mercy of the spiritual master, to come back to the perfectional platform. Because again, the spirit soul, you and I, are by nature pure. It's not that he's working some alchemy. The alchemy or the magic is to uncover that purity. The living entity is by nature pure, but we're covered by these modes of material nature. Because of that, it's like putting on rose-colored glasses. You don't see proper colors anymore. But if you take off the glasses, then now you see everything. You see what is orange, what's red, what's green. So it's like that. We're covered over by these three modes of material nature: goodness, passion, and ignorance. And by the spiritual masters is being pleased with you, Krishna removes that cover. So that being pleased can come at any point. In Dhruva's case, Narad Muni was pleased with him, but by his determination, he came to the perfectional. We may not be so determined, but the Guru is pleased. Okay, I know you're not, 100%, but I'm really pleased with your service. Then Krishna will make up the gap for you. But don't try to take advantage that way. Why not just stick? When we become initiated, like we have new initiates here, they make a promise in front of the deities, in front of the devotees, in front of the spiritual master, chant 16 rounds every day, follow the four principles. Just do that. And therefore, when new initiates come to me and ask, Prabhu, can you give some blessing? I said, my blessing to you is I pray to Krishna that you will uphold your vows. Because if you uphold your vows, you're home free. Guaranteed, Prabhupada said. Follow those principles, chant 16 rounds every day, guaranteed, you're going back to Godhead. So why would we not do that? Foolish to not do that. Ticket is written. Go Loka Vrindavan, Bhakta Michael, or you're going to get a new name soon. Stamp. You just have to take that ticket and go back. But if you start, I can trade half of the ticket for some gold, or then you're messing up. Just hold on to that ticket and go back to God. All right, anything else? Maybe one more question before we
Thank you.
stop. Remind me your name, please.
Abraham.
Okay.
Thank you for the class, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna.
At the end, you were mentioning reading and how regularly reading and hearing from Srila Prabhupada's books is very helpful for your spiritual life.
Essential. Not just helpful. It's essential.
Throughout Prabhupada's books, in the first purport of the Bhagavatam, he cites that it's necessary to hear, after finishing his translation of the Bhagavatam, other Acharya's translations of the Bhagavatam, like Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, Sanatana Goswami, and Jiva Goswami. As well as in Chaitanya Charitamrita, he recommends it's essential to read other books. So my question is, when is it appropriate in our spiritual life to supplement our reading of Srila Prabhupada's books with previous acharyas and current teachers of Gaudiya Vaishnavism?
Well, if you ever saw a picture of Prabhupada translating, he had all those translations there. So his presentation includes Vishwanath, Chakravarti, Jiva, all of that is already there. Sometimes he explicitly says that. Jiva Goswami makes this point, or Vishwanath, but he was reading all those commentaries to make his commentary. He wasn't just making things up. But his commentary is just right for persons in Kali Yuga, in this particular time circumstance. Now, if you're a scholar, you're writing some book or something and you need some extra information, yeah. But for the vast majority of people, there's absolutely no necessity to go back to the sources of that Prabhupada already incorporated into his work.
But Prabhupada said to read them in the first purport of the Bhagavatam. He said it's necessary.
I am telling you, it's not necessary because it's already incorporated.
But Prabhupada is telling us
if you want to go and read, but make sure you've read Prabhupada's books and understood them. Now, do you have a spiritual master? You do. So, your spiritual master is your Diksha Guru. And unless he's given you permission to go elsewhere for Shiksha, he's also your Shiksha Guru. So you ask him. If you're not sure if it's time for you to read something else, but I'll give you one incident that happened in Vrindavan. One devotee said to Srila Prabhupada, you know, Srila Prabhupada, my favorite author is Bhaktivinoda Thakur. He said, no, I am your favorite author. In other words, don't jump over. With permission of the spiritual master, you can hear. Because Because, it's coming in our line. It's not like you're hearing something. But at the same time, Prabhupada did caution. Because people may wonder. Prabhupada opened the centers and he specifically, explicitly said he didn't want his god brothers to be invited to speak in his temples. And why? He said, because if they say one thing different than what I've told you, you'll be confused. So the spiritual master-disciple relationship is not an ordinary relationship. When Prabhupada was ill, he was on the West Coast, and he decided to go back to India to recover his health. So the devotees were worried, how are we going to get by without that? They only knew Prabhupada. Who's going to instruct us when we have good? So they deputed Mukunda Maharaj to go and ask Prabhupada if it would be okay to invite one of his godbrothers to come while he was gone. Mukunda Maharaj told me the story personally. He said he was anxious. He became anxious because he knew what was going to happen. He had an understanding of what was going to happen. So he went to Prabhupada and he placed the question. And Prabhupada started crying. He started crying. And he said, and this is instructive, this is his instruction to us about hearing from others. He said, my spiritual master was not an ordinary person. He saved me. That was Prabhupada's response to that question of can we invite your god brothers to come and speak to us and give us the instruction while you're gone. So the point is, from that exchange, and in general, you hear from your spiritual master. Now, if the spiritual master gives you permission to hear from others, okay. But in general, whatever the spiritual master is giving you is sufficient. It's not that Prabhupada said, go read other books because what I'm giving you is insufficient. He's not saying that. And that's why generally, again, if you're doing some research, you're writing something, fine. But in general, everything you need to know is in Prabhupada's books. You don't have to go back and read Vishwanath Chakrabarti separately because he already incorporated all of that. Just like the six Goswamis. Nana Shastra Vicharana Kinapino. Shadharma Sangstapa. Lokana Mitakarino Chibune Manyon. They scrutinizingly studied all of the real scriptures. Do you have to go back and do that? No, they did that for you. They scrutinizingly studied all the revealed scriptures with the aim of establishing eternal religious principles for the benefit of every human being. So every human being does not have to go back and scrutinizingly study all the revealed scriptures. It's already done by the Goswamis. And all of that Goswami knowledge has come down in Parampara through Srila Prabhupada. So it's not necessary. In some cases, yes, you may get permission to do that. But it's not necessary. Trust me, everything you need to know is there in Prabhupada's books. You read Prabhupada's books thoroughly, again and again and again, and every time you read it, you'll get fresher understanding. Okay? Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Gaur Bhakta Vrinda ki.